Alright, so our speaker for the night is Dr. Lyakat Takim. He is the Sharjah Chair in Global Islam at McMaster University in Hamilton, Canada. A native of the Zanzibar, Tunisia, he has spoken at more than 80 academic conferences and authored 100 scholarly work on diverse topics. He graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Economics at City University in London, and then he obtained his PhD in History of Religions from the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. Help me in welcoming Dr. Lyakat Takim.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be here in front of you. Unlike my two speakers, I'm going to speak from within the faith, so to speak. I'm a Muslim, Shia Muslim, and I want to discuss certain issues which arise within the Muslim community. Islam today has been deterritorialized. When we talk of deterritorialization, we mean to say that it's no longer attached to a particular territory. In the past, in medieval times, classical period, Muslims used to live in what they call Darul Islam, the abode of Islam, where they were in the majority. But never in history have Muslims lived abroad in non-Muslim countries as much as they do now. So it is very much history in the making. Deterritorialization, Muslims having shifted from their traditional territories to living as a minority in a place like Canada, has created its own challenges. First of all, there is what we call the immigrant Islam phenomenon. Immigrant Islam is the Islam of the immigrants, the parents, like myself and a few others around here. Immigrant Muslims, unlike you young youths, tend to universalize Islam. They tend to say that their Islam is the only one and genuine form of Islam. Whether you're Lebanese or Pakistani or Indian or Tanzanian like mine, in my case, we tend to think that our Islam is a genuine and true proper Islam. Any Islam which is different from ours is not a real Islam. Until we come to a place like Canada, where we find that there are different expressions of Islam, that Islam is not monolithic. Anything alien to immigrant Islam is alien to Islam itself, at least in the eyes of the immigrant Muslims. What happens is once immigrant Muslims come here, they create their own boundaries. They accentuate their ethnic identities. So for example, I do not know whether it happens in Ottawa, but if you come to Toronto, you go to New York, for example, you'll find there is a Pakistani mosque. There is a Lebanese mosque, there's an Iraqi mosque, an Iranian mosque. Is there an Islamic mosque somewhere? We don't know. So in other words, there is what we call a homesick mosques. These ethnic divisions create more differentiation, segmentation of the Muslim community. Remember, the more identities you have, the more boundaries you create. You are, for example, Lebanese. That's one identity. But then you may be Muslim, and within the Muslim you are a Shia, and you happen to be a woman, for example. God help you there, because you are even more minority complex. You see what I mean? And of course there are national identities, there are linguistic identities, there are ethnic identities, religious identities, cultural identities. And the more identities we have, the more differentiation and divisions we create. What immigrant Muslims have done is not only created homesick mosque, as I call it, they've also tried to import their traditional culture. So a Pakistani wants to do things here the way that he or she used to do it in Pakistan, back home, because they feel more comfortable. You'll be surprised, so many Pakistani youths come and tell me that my daddy says I must go to Pakistan every summer. I said, why should you go to Pakistan every summer? He says, because I become more Muslim when I go to Pakistan. I said, excuse me, Islam does not reside in Pakistan. Islam resides in your heart. You can be in Mecca and be the perfect kafir, and be in Yellowknife and be the best Muslim. Because Islam does not depend on where you are, Islam depends on who you are. So, in other words, we can't afford, by going to Pakistan, we're not creating more Muslims, we're getting more Pakistanis. Because we tend to accentuate our culture. Not only that, but there is a great resistance, as we have seen, by many immigrants to be what we may call acculturated to Canadian culture. We tend to think that everything Canadian is bad, is out there, is a threat. Many parents tend to think, not all of them, but many of them think, that the only way to become a good Muslim is to resist Canadian culture. But there's a lot of good things in Canadian culture. There's a lot of very positive things. We have become better Muslims in many ways by coming to Canada. Remember this much, Islam is not tied to any culture. Wherever Muslims went, they absorbed local culture, because Islam is a religion which is not necessarily connected to a particular culture. And therefore you will find that Nigerian Muslims are very different from Malay Muslims. Russian Muslims are very different from Canadian Muslims. They're still Muslims, but culturally, in many ways, the things that they eat, whatever they do, is different. Remember this much also, when the Jews came from Poland, they were initially Polish Jews. Gradually they became Canadian Jews. When the Christians came from France, they were French Catholics, for example. Later on they became Canadian Catholics. And therefore we Muslims will become Canadian Muslims. And there's nothing wrong in that. To give you an example of this cultural dimension in Islam, I don't know what it happens in your culture, but in my culture, I come from a place called Zanzibar. Have you heard of Zanzibar? Zanzibar became famous when they realized I was born there, you know. Very modest. Anyway, so in my culture, on the wedding night, the man, the groom, washes the feet of the bride before any hanky-panky. They washes the feet of the bride. Do you guys do that? No? Well, I was giving this lecture in Denver. I was teaching at Denver, Colorado. When I finished the lecture, a lot of Iranian women came up to me and they said, Dr. Takim, can we remarry our husbands? I said, what do you mean by remarry our husbands? He said, our husbands have never even touched our feet, let alone wash them. Tell them to scrub them. I said, no. Actually, the washing of the feet is symbolic. It's supposed to bring blessings to the home. And therefore we wash them and sprinkle the water around the home, symbolically spreading the barakah, the blessings, to different parts of the house. And the bride is bringing barakah. It's a nice little system. However, the younger generation, I've been talking about immigrant Islam so far, the younger generation is seeking a different kind of Islamic identity, a global Islamic identity. In other words, not necessarily one which is tied to home or back home. And let us not forget that they are moving beyond this ethnic Islam. They are moving towards a post-ethnic Islam and adopting Canadian culture. And as I said, we cannot say no to that, because Canada is our home. We're going to live here, we're going to die here, we have to embrace it. There are some elements which we do not accept. I understand that. But we've always been selective to accepting or absorbing local culture, wherever they went, whether it was in Spain or whether they went in Malaysia. To give an example of this local Canadian culture, in the olden days, until now, normally when we meet each other, what do we say? Salam alaikum. But these youths today are with yo's, you know. Yo, salam alaikum, yo, you know. And then yo alaikum salam, yo. One of the major challenges that we face, I think, within the Muslim community itself, is our masajid, our Islamic centers. Our Islamic centers, the way that I've observed them, frankly speaking, have failed our younger generation. Wherever I go, they say, our youths are not coming. I say, well, what do you offer them for them to come? Well, they say, we now speak in English. We have changed the language, but we have not changed the substance. That's our problem. We've changed the language, okay, from Arabic or Urdu to now we speak in English. The substance has remained the same. In other words, whatever he was preaching about, because most of our preachers come from back home, whether Lebanon or Pakistan or whatever, or Iran, and they are attuned to their culture, their way of thinking, which is very different from the younger mentality here. Let's not forget, 85 to 90% of our youth, Muslim youth, attend universities, correct? Colleges, where they are intellectually engaged. They learn about Max Weber, for example. They learn about Durkheim, Immanuel Kant. I teach in the university, I know. They learn about Freud and so on. When they come to the mosque, they only hear the same old thing about Ali and Abu Bakr and Umar and so on. Things that they've heard so many a time before. And consequently, they do not feel intellectually engaged. Many a place I go to, we build beautiful mosques, and then we say, how come the youths are not coming in? The reason is this: we build buildings, we build structures, but we fail to build the hearts and the minds that are going to occupy those mosques. Therefore, we need to change according to the needs of the times. We need to also alter the way that we speak, the kind of programs we hold for the youths. The youths are more into retreats, debates, discussions, rather than normal khutbahs. A common joke between Muslims is this: one Muslim youth is asking another Muslim youth outside the mosque on a Friday. One Muslim youth says, "Is the khutbah over inside the mosque?" And the other one says, "The khutbah is over, but the imam is still speaking." It's very simple. The sermon is over, but the imam is still speaking, which means that the imam is babbling about. These youths, our youths, alhamdulillah, are very smart. To give you an example, a friend of mine was telling me that he was to teach in a madrasa. Madrasa is not a place where we train terrorists, by the way. Madrasa is a place, a Sunday school, where we learn the basics of Islam. So my friend, who was a teacher, was asking a 5-year-old youth, says, you know the Quran says that Jonah, Nabi Yunus, was eaten by a whale, like a biblical story. How can a whale eat a prophet? The 5-year-old scratched his head and says, I don't know the answer to this. But when I meet Jonah in heaven, I'll ask him. So the teacher wanted to be even more smart. Says, supposing Jonah is in hell, then what will you do? And then the youth said, then you can ask him. A 5-year-old sends his teacher to hell, basically. One of the other things that we as Muslims need to re-examine is our marriage patterns. I do not know how the marriages occur in your community. In my community is what we call the coffee system, whereby the boy goes to the girl's house and she comes and gives him coffee, and then they discuss about it. Not about the coffee, but about the possibility of getting married, which apparently doesn't work anymore. Or there are a few matchmakers who go to mosques and try and matchmake a few here and there. Because of our ethnic Islam, there are very few cases of, for example, of a Lebanese girl marrying a Pakistani boy, or a Khoja girl marrying an Iranian boy, simply because we are too divided within ourselves. The case is just like this. Supposing you have a father and a young daughter called Zainab. The father drops Zainab off at the university, at the college. Says, Zainab, you can see there's Jack, there's Paul. You can talk to them, you can interact with them, but you can't marry them. They're not Muslims. And then the same father takes the same Zainab to a mosque. And he drops her off at the mosque, they're outside the door, and he says, you see, there's Ali, there's Muhammad, there's Baqir. You shall not talk to them, astaghfirullah. They're Muslims. You cannot interact with them, but you must marry one of them. It ain't going to work, my friends. It's not going to work. These youths today will not accept it. Increasingly, I see young Muslims marrying outside the community. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with marrying outside the community as long as we create people who come into the community. Many a time, people become Muslims 5 minutes before the marriage, and then you never see them again. Instead of them coming in, they take our youth out. My sisters and brothers, I see the food is being served, so obviously there's a message that is being passed to us. But just 1 or 2 points, I think I have a few more minutes left. One of the challenges that Muslims face today also is what is called fiqh al-aqaliyya. Fiqh al-aqaliyya basically means minority fiqh. For a long time, our laws, and I think we need to differentiate between Sharia and law. That system for a long time that was being discussed in Canada about the Sharia code and Sharia law, it's not Sharia law, it is fiqh law. Let's get this difference very clear. Sharia is from God. Fiqh is from human beings, human understanding of that law. Therefore, we can talk of Sharia of Allah, Sharia of Muhammad. Do we ever say of the Sharia of Shafi'i or Sharia of Imam Sadiq or Sharia of Abu Hanifa? We say the fiqh of Imam Sadiq, fiqh of Abu Hanifa. Why do we do that? Because there is a difference between the two. Fiqh is the human understanding. What they were talking about in Canada, unfortunately nobody even told them, was not the Sharia law, it's actually the fiqh law, human understanding. And that human understanding must change according to the times. Today our scholars now are talking of the fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence, in Canada, in the West. Because the issues that we Muslims face in Canada is very different from those living in Iran or Lebanon or back home. And there's a growing amount of literature coming on this. For example, intergender handshaking is a very, very topical issue. Can a man shake hands with a woman who are not related to each other? Well, there's a different, and the ulama have ruled that under certain circumstances, under darura, under necessity. I know I'm opening Pandora's box here, a can of worms, but still, we need to talk about it. Or how do you pray in Nunavut circle? I don't know the way this pronounce it. Right at the North Pole there, that if you know, where the sun hardly rises in the winter and hardly sets in the summer. How do you fast then? These are some of the issues that are being discussed today. My friends, one other important point, because we are all now properly connected to the internet, is called the Internet Islam. The Internet Islam has its advantages, but also a lot of disadvantages. You see, the internet, anybody can put anything on Wikipedia. It's not censored. We don't believe in censorship, fine. But the problem is when you get wrong ideas, radical ideas being transmitted from the Middle East or from some other areas over the internet to our youth here. Traditionally, knowledge was always vertical, from those who are learned coming down to those who are less learned. Now, because of the internet, knowledge has become horizontal. Anybody with a little bit of knowledge here and there can upload anything on a website, and before you know it, everybody's reading about it. Some of the most radical ideas, fundamentalist ideas, are being transmitted to our Muslim youth in the West. Therefore, be very careful. Haven't you seen this internet or something coming on your email? Coca-Cola is haram, bread is haram, Colgate is haram. My God, they want to starve us to death. Almost everything I can think of is haram. Before you forward that, please delete it. I always thank Allah, God, for the one who created the delete button, you know. Because a lot of these are wrong. Before you forward it, at least check with an alim. Because a lot of ideas that we get are wrong. And because of the internet, even fundamentalist Islam is being transmitted. Haven't you seen the Salafis with the most violent and terroristic ideas, transmitting their ideas? Haven't you seen videos of terrorists rapping? I have. Yeah, they hold guns here and Allah this and Allah that, and strike themselves with bombs. And unfortunately, some youths can very easily be influenced by them. And if you think that I'm exaggerating, think about this. Just last week, 2 weeks ago actually, I was looking on YouTube. Everybody knows YouTube today. Really, my 2-year-old granddaughter, she can take me to YouTube. But this particular thing struck me as to how ideas which are formulated by a group of extremist Muslims can suddenly be put on YouTube, and every Muslim or any Muslim anywhere in the world can have access to it. This actually occurred in London, England, in an area called Walthamstow. For those of you who have been to London will know where it is. A group of Muslims believed that they had the right not only to interpret Islamic law, but to impose it, not only on Muslims, but even on non-Muslims in Walthamstow in London, England. So if you happen to go to Walthamstow in London, England, you had to wear a hijab, even if you're not a Muslim. They would, if you were to fornicate, they would impose the hudud, the Islamic penalties there. If you did not wear the hijab, they would punish you. If you were to drink, they would punish you, and so on. Who said that we can impose Islamic law in a non-Muslim country? Especially when we are in a minority. But based on that, these ideas can permeate and affect Muslims all over the world. Charisma has replaced substance today. Well, my friends, my time is running short, but I think that one final point that needs to come. What pleases me here today is the fact that we are all together. There are young girls, young boys meeting, talking, discussing, and all properly dressed up in an Islamic manner. There's nothing wrong in that. Except that when these young girls who are well-trained, well-educated, when they go to mosques, what happens? They are put away in some basement. In the universities, colleges, they become active participants in knowledge. In the mosques, they become passive recipients. I did a survey once and I asked, what role do women play in your mosques? And I was told they make tea after the program. That's the only thing they do. If we want to keep our young women within our community, We've got to treat them with respect and let them enjoy the same benefits as our young boys do, which is to interact with the speaker and to be able to participate in the activities of our centers. Wassalamu alaikum.